Hello, everybody. Welcome to Monday Mentor. I'm Jen Whitmer, and I help teams and leaders solve conflict, cultivate communication, and create empowered teams. And on Mondays, I invite somebody who is brilliant in their field to be our leadership mentor. For today, it is a friend named Marlene Eick, and I am so excited that she is here. Marlene is a leadership development consultant. She works with teams and individuals and helping them grow and develop their leadership. She has courses, she does events. She is an all-around lovely human being. And I'm so excited that she's joining us today. Welcome, Marlene.
Hi, Jen. Thanks so much for having me. Such a pleasure to be on the show with you.
Oh, I'm just thrilled that you're here. I'm so excited for this topic. So before we totally jump in about how to show up professionally and what that's about, I would love for you just to tell us, how did you get here? Like, tell us a little bit about your leadership story.
Sure. So my leadership story, especially in this field, really begins with my graduate program in leadership development, which was at the University of Florida. So go Gators. Shout out to the Gators, right? But after studying that, and then I began my career with the university, and I had the chance in that specific position to teach some courses in leadership development. And then even after I left the university, I was still just engaged in working with different groups and was fortunate enough to be called, to work with some different groups to teach some of those things I had been doing before. And of course, and that just keeps snowballing over the years, right, into different sorts of things, which eventually led into some one-on-one coaching, which led to working with some organizations. And originally I was focused on what I thought were maybe these more like serious leadership topics, right? Those things that we all talk about or read books about, and which are important and they are serious. But also, what I realized is that so many different organizations were looking for someone or looking to fill this gap with many of their leaders on some of these professional skills. And I like to share the story. I resisted that at first because I thought, oh, those things aren't as important or they're not as significant, right, as these other topics perhaps. But what we realize is that they're just as important and just as significant, just as critical, especially in order for us to do all those other things. It's just sort of been a journey how I've arrived at this spot where now I get to provide some training on professionalism and professional skills with different organizations. And it's something that's really fun for me to do.
Oh, I love that. And I think that one of those key things is that we think of, oh, this isn't quite as important. We downplay some of the skills that actually make us unique or are the ones that open the door. And I think so much of what you do talk about are the ones that open the door. And I was at a conference this weekend, and the one of the women who was teaching was talking about, she worked for Cirque du Soleil for years, and be really careful about how you use the word just. And I think sometimes we do that with professional skills that, oh, it's just this. And we can do that for anything. I'm sure as soon as I said the just, everybody, like if you're listening, you're like, oh, I do that in this area. So tell us a little bit about what are some of these professional skills that you used to just, but now see as these really important opening skills.
Well, and Jed, you said just the right thing there, right? Oh, I see there, I just used the word and I didn't even mean to again, but.
Well, that's the okay way of doing this.
Right. But they are the things that help us open the door. And so if leadership is about influence and building relationships with people, if the foundation of true leadership is built upon the relationship and trust that you have with another person or group of people, you need to know how to open the door to that relationship or build that relationship, or what are the norms of behavior and skills in different environments that would help me to build that relationship. And so if we're focused on, okay, if I want to build a relationship well, what can I do to feel comfortable in this scenario myself, also look credible so I can build the relationship well, all in the name of building that relationship effectively and removing any distractions that could keep you from having the conversation that you want or having that connection that you want. So some of those things are, do we know how to introduce ourselves really effectively and directly? Do we know how to have smarter small talk in those beginning conversations, often in a networking environment where we can make a quick connection with somebody that's still meaningful, but is appropriate for the setting that we're in. It's going to be that quick conversation. Do we know how to introduce ourselves to a room full of people or a group full of people in a way that makes us, again, feel comfortable, appear confident, and also just be really credible then with the room of folks that we're in? But we also talk about things like, how do you have some stage presence in the front of the room? I mean, these are the things that we all need to know, but no one's ever really taught us. Like, how do you use a podium? How should you effectively use a podium? Can you put your hand on it or not? Or should you? And this is not about rules to follow. This is simply, how can I help you walk through all these different scenarios so that, again, you feel comfortable and confident, and that when you're in those scenarios, you feel like you have the professional skills to focus on the connection that you want to make, that relationship that you want to build, and you're not worried about, should I stand for this introduction or not? Or I'm not sure what I'm supposed to say in this moment, or even to dining scenarios, some dining etiquette in a banquet setting or, in a restaurant setting. So there's kind of a full spectrum of those things. And again, it's all those things that we need to know, but oftentimes no one's really ever taught us. We've never learned them in different settings until we get to that professional scenario and we go, okay, now I'm not sure what I need to do. We all have the capacity to do those things. Sometimes, depending on what our daily routines are like, our daily lives and our daily routines may just not have us practice those things very often. And so if we only do those things once in a while, we might need some training on that in order to kind of really accelerate the practice and just kind of get good at that quickly.
Well, there's so many skills that you mentioned in there. Like, there's such a
Yeah.
breadth to these introduction skills, to stage presence, to executive presence, to, like you said, the dining scenario. And one of the things you said, I think that is so important, is that it's not something we necessarily do every day. And I can remember I was in, we were in Prague, and I was with a group with my husband. So he was the main event. I was just traveling with him. But it was a group of wives, and we sat down at this white tablecloth table. There's 3 forks, few knives, I don't remember how many spoons, several glasses, and all of that kind of stuff. And I hadn't done that in a really long time, and nor was I expecting it for lunch. And so, like, I just thought we were going to lunch, and I did not expect that. And I kind of sat there for a moment and had that feeling in the pit of my stomach of, oh my gosh, what do I remember? What do I do? And honestly, I went back to 6th grade Girl Scout etiquette badge. And I was like, kind of like in my brain, kind of thinking about it. And then I was like, oh, I've done this before. I can do this again. And it's part of self-efficacy, which is one of the things that I talk a lot about in teaching, but because that's where the confidence comes from. Oh, I have been trained how to do this. And now it's not going to get in my way. And I could lean to the person up to my right and ask some really great questions and not be focused on, oh, I'm feeling so insecure and focused on myself, but rather could get to know a woman who ended up being one of the largest egg farmers in Scotland and had a great conversation, like it was amazing. But I love that it's that open door that you teach. And so when people are coming to you, what are some of the most common questions you get about professionalism? Because it's such a loosely defined term in different settings. So how do you help people navigate that? And what do they ask you?
Sure. So in a lot of the trainings that I'm doing with organizations, a lot of times the groups that I'm working with are associations or member organizations where they're helping to train some of their leaders to do some advocacy work or working with industry partners or something that they might be doing that as a leader in that organization. Oftentimes a volunteer leader in that organization or a board member in that organization. So again, that person's daily life just might not have them in those scenarios often. So again, it's not that they don't have the capacity for it. I don't know. It's just that when you don't do that often and you only have to do that 3 or 4 times a year, you don't want to have to only practice a few times, right? You want to feel better. I love that you mentioned that like pit in your stomach feeling, because I think we've all felt that in some circumstance or another, right? It's that feeling of, at least for me, I'll just share a little bit of my brain, right? For me, it's that feeling of, do I belong here? Am I really cut out for this? right? And so I get
100%.
those feelings of doubt that happen in there. And then when my brain gets on that, now all my brain can think about is that versus the conversation I wanted to be having, just as you described at that lunch that you had, right? You kind of had to move past that quickly. So when I'm working with organizations, a lot of times the conversation we're having as we're planning the training is making sure those leaders are prepared for those networking conversations when they arise. Because again, unless you practice that often in those scenarios, you'll end up not maximizing that opportunity. And as an organization, you want your leaders to maximize every opportunity you have for a connection, for relationship, either formation or deepening, and to really be building upon that for the work that your organization is doing. So a lot of times we will walk through those scenarios in those trainings, right? And so it's that idea of we're going to let's just walk through some logistics. Like, what do you do when you arrive at any kind of networking event? We'll talk through some logistics, and we'll talk through like, how do you handle food and drink? And do you hold both? Or do you hold, like, we talk through some of those things that like we've all just been like,
You're
I don't know how
there.
to
Do I
handle
hold
this,
my
right?
drink, my
Yes,
crudité?
right.
I want to shake your hand.
Yeah.
I don't know what to do.
By the way, in case you haven't thought about this, right, you always want to leave your right hand free, because I shake with my right hand. And so I want my right hand to be free at all times in those scenarios, so that it is free and it is dry. Like, I haven't just had it on the outside of my glass or touching on my food or things like that. I want it to be like free and clean and ready to shake your hand. So, we talk through logistical things like, how do you manage all of that? But then we really walk through, okay, what are the conversations that you would want to have? And so what are those really smart, open-ended questions you can ask somebody at this type of scenario? So if you're going to be at that industry event with folks in this sort of audience, what's a short list of questions that you could use to open that conversation? We walk through that, right? So then, because what I want for people to do when they leave one of those trainings is I want them to have in their mind, often for an event that they might be going to that evening or the next day, I want them to have that short list of questions ready right there in their head, that they can walk into that networking event that evening or the next day, and they're ready to have those smart conversations that help them connect. And that way, we're all still going to feel a little nervous. But what I don't want is for them to walk into that event with that pit in the stomach, feeling like, oh my God, I gotta do this. I have to do this. And how long until this thing is over? And so really what I just, because the tendency is for us just to clump up with the other people that we know at those types of events. And so especially if we're attending an event with or on behalf of an organization, again, our natural tendency as humans is to just gather up with the other people that we know. So with the other board members that we came with the other volunteers from our organization that we arrived with. And rather, I want us to, feel comfortable enough to know, okay, this might be a tiny bit uncomfortable, but I feel like I have the skills now. I'm armed with the questions I want to ask. I've thought through how I'm going to hold food or drink and do all of that. And so now I can go out and I can talk to the folks I want to talk to here over the next hour and really start those connections. Because if leadership and influence is about relationships at the foundational level, we want to be able to, again, move forward those relationships every opportunity that we have.
So I have like a funny story and then a follow-up question for you.
Yes.
So I was at this huge conference this past week called Story in Nashville. And I was a speaker, but I'm also with the 700 and some odd other people,
Right.
at this event. But, and I was really nervous to reach out to people. I had several friends there. And of course, I belong to you. I want to stay with you. But I had this like couple prepared questions to ask people as a little interview project because, it's a bunch of storytellers. So people like social media. And so I had these prepared questions and I would feel that in my pit and then know, oh, other people, I've asked this question and it's going to be okay. Because I had that prepared question. And I know for me, that brings a lot of peace. So, but I still had the awkward feeling, friends, don't misunderstand that. But I could get over it because I had the question. But I'm curious what you say to people in that, well, if you prepare questions, that's not authentic. I just like to show, how do you dispel that myth?
Great question. Well, okay. First, I want to just also respond to the fact that you said you're always a little bit nervous. I want to echo that. And I have often shared that I have played the piano and organ at my church for 25 years or so. I mean, long enough, right? A long time. And long enough that even outwardly, I don't always get very nervous. I'm a little bit nervous every Sunday morning that I play, especially when I play the organ. I might be able to calm my nerves outwardly. And yet I sweat. I've just shared so much. Just shared more than anyone wants to know.
So fun.
But your body like
We're
does
real.
not lie to you, right? Your body doesn't lie to you. I still
Amen.
I sweat so much. So even though I have learned like to be more comfortable, and I am more comfortable than I was, I still get nervous every Sunday morning that I play. So I share that because I don't think we should ever expect that if we get really good at networking or really great at talking to, having first conversations with people we don't know, or really great at speaking in front of a room, that all of a sudden we're not going to feel nervous or awkward or uncomfortable. We're always going to feel a little bit of that. I think for 95% of us, we're always going to feel a little bit of that. So the goal isn't for that to go away. The goal is just for us to be more practiced in those conversations. But the second piece of that, Jen, is having questions prepared. Is that inauthentic? Not at all. I actually think it's about being prepared to have the conversation you want to have. So it's not, you still get to decide the questions ahead of time, right? I still get to decide before I go into the room, what are the few questions that I wanted to ask this group? So if I work with a lot of different groups in agriculture, and I actually work full-time for a group in agriculture now, the Ohio Corn and Wheat Growers Association. And so I'm attending a lot of different agriculture related events. And so a common question I, might ask if I am working with a group of farmers, it might just be like, tell me how the year is going, right? Like how their growing year is going. And that opens up just the conversation for them to share what they would like. If I'm in a networking event with a lot of industry colleagues, I might say, hey, what's a project? Tell me about a project you're working on right now, right? It's a very open-ended question. It's something I sincerely would like to know because I want to know more about what they're doing right now, what they're working on. And so those questions that we can decide ahead of time, we still get to decide what they are about something we'd really like to know, but they're open-ended and they're relevant to the context and the audience of the folks, that we're meeting with. So I don't see it as inauthentic. I actually think it makes me prepared to have the authentic conversations that I want, because I know that if I don't come into those situations ready, then my brain freaks out a little bit. And then I don't have any of the conversations I wanted to have because all I talked about was the weather or the snack that I'm eating. And while that might be fun, that doesn't help build our relationship at all.
Exactly. Joy Beth Smith is an editor and producer, and she's worked on lots of podcasts and magazines. And she said one time on social, and I thought this was so brilliant, that an intentional love that is planned is no less valid. And I was like, that's so true. And it's not less valid. I know it's no less valid when we prepare ahead. It's actually a great form of caring. And so just as you said, getting ready to have the conversation you want to have and inviting somebody else into your space, it's a way to prepare. And so I think that's so incredibly valuable. Okay, I have one more question. Go ahead.
Yes, well, I'd say, and if you have prepared in your mind a whole gamut of things that you might ask for any type of event, then when you are in front of someone, you can pick and choose from the things that you would like to ask them, right? In that really authentic way. But I know kind of what all the options might be that work really well for me. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So here's my last question before we have to wrap up. I can't even believe it. Is what do you do? How do you professionally follow up? We've had this great networking conversation. I've showed up, I've had presence, I've networked really well. And now it's 2 days later or a day later. What do I do to follow up without being, as I like to say, that person? I like that story in my mind happens. So what do we do?
Yeah, well, I think we all live in such a digital age where there's very easy ways for us to connect with folks digitally and online that help us keep that conversation going. So I think LinkedIn is an obvious place. If you're not already connected, connect with somebody, you send them a quick thank you or, hey, it was nice to meet you and nice to connect, right? It can be just a simple one-line follow-up. Now, if you had a great conversation and you actually want to set a meeting or have a deeper conversation, hopefully you've gotten that person's contact information. You can send that quick 2 or 3 line email that you can follow up. However, even though we live in a digital world, I never want to underestimate the power of handwritten follow-ups because I still think they have such power. And so for certain connections, I do still send a handwritten thank you. or a handwritten, "It was so nice to meet you," with my card, especially, if I didn't get a chance to give them my card or whatever the situation might have been. So I think that those online connections and online ways to follow up and then have an opportunity and an open path to continue the relationship are totally appropriate, and professional in 2022. Never underestimate the power of a nice handwritten note if you think that like fits the scenario.
Yeah.
And since most of us don't send them, a handwritten note really really stands out when you have the chance to send
Yeah.
one.
And so just to add to that little tip, I keep in
Please.
my desk right here um, stamps and
I love that
cards.
they're just
So when
like right here handy.
they're literally right there because I am lazy. And if it's not convenient, I will forget the intention of wanting to do that lovely
Yeah,
thing. And so just my added tip to underline that really important point. So, oh my gosh, Marlene, I know I want to keep talking. I knew you were going to be a great
thank you.
conversation and just so helpful to all of us about showing up professionally. Tell us where we can find you. Tell us a little bit about your Essentials of Professionalism
Absolutely.
course. Tell us all the things.
Well, you can always find me at marleneeick.com. And as well, Jen has the link here for you. I have an online course called The Essentials of Professionalism. And so it is 13 video lessons. The content is some of what we've touched on here, everything from how do you have those in-person connections? How do you interpret dress codes these days so that you can show up with that first impression and make the first impression that you want to make for the group? How do you have some sort of stage presence? Also, how do you show up professionally online? How do you frame up and light a video conference? Did you look like a pro when you have a video meeting, plus lots more and some checklists and kind of download some worksheets in there for you. So you can always check that out. It's available on my website for individuals and for organizations, but love to connect with you there.
Yeah, absolutely. And y'all, you don't understand the value of this thing. I keep pushing her, but this is a value, let me tell you. You are a delightful human, so much knowledge for us. Thank you, thank you, thank you for being with us today.
Thank
Follow
you.
Marlene Eick, connect with her, find out more about what she can do for you, and just get to know her because she is a lovely, lovely person. Thanks so much for being here today.
Thanks, Jen. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely. All right, everybody. See you next Monday. Bye.